How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Thorn's Jungle. Hope everyone's had a great week. It's Friday, baby. Well, it is for me because I'm in Australia, therefore I'm in the future. So if all of yous are listening and it's Thursday, you will soon be in the future. Actually, you're never not in the future. You're always in the future. Because you can't be in the present, because once you've already said it's the present, that time has already elapsed and you're already in the future. Anyway, whatever. Uh, this episode is a two-parter. Well, two different topics in the same episode. And we're going to start off with, and you know what? Both of them are kind of very similar subject-wise, and both kind of as ridiculous as one another. And the first one is, you know how women or men like leather handbags, leather clutches and purses. I love leather. I'm a massive leather guy. There's my leather pouch. I got leather. I'm a leather dude, brown leather. But there is a company and some scientists that are apparently developing T.rex leather. That's right, a leather made from a Tyrannosaurus rex, an animal that's been extinct for 65 million years since the Cretaceous period. How are they doing this, you ask? Well, this is their science behind how they're going to achieve this. It's basically a few scientists, a biotechnology company, and I guess a fashion company have all colluded with each other and all combined forces to come up with this grand idea of developing products made out of Tyrannosaurus rex skin. Now, given the fact that we've never found T-rex skin, we've never really found any soft tissue from a T-rex, you got to wonder how they're going to do this. And the science is that so basically, the one bit of almost, and I'm doing air quotes here, soft tissue that they have of a T-rex is a piece of collagen that was found that was still kind of intact and kind of still soft, I guess. It wasn't completely petrified, which means all the organic material that makes up that bone or skin or whatever hasn't been fully replaced with minerals yet, which is what fossilization is. Fossilization is there is no organic material, DNA, nothing left of the animal. It's been replaced by minerals, so by the rock, and it kind of makes a like a stencil of that animal's fossils and things like that. So using this collagen, the scientists have analyzed it and they've looked at the structure of it, and they believe that they can recreate that collagen in a lab and apply it to synthetic leather. Now, that sounds amazing. Who the hell wouldn't want a cruelty-free leather product that is a recreated T-rex skin? Who the hell wouldn't want that? I would get a jacket made out of that. That'd be sick. Oh man, what's that jacket you got on? Oh, it's leather. Oh wow, it's interesting texture. What is it? Oh, it's T-rex. Like, what a status symbol. It's like you've gone out and hunted the bastard yourself. Like Roland Tembo in The Lost World, the second Jurassic Park. He just wants to shoot that buck, that's all. Anyway, now that sounds great, but it's not going to happen. And I'll tell you why. It's not as simple as getting collagen or organic material from a long extinct dinosaur and recreating it in a lab and then creating synthetic leather out of it. So collagen is found in our skin, things like that. Collagen is a series of protein strands Uh, Now, the biggest issue here is the collagen that was found in the T Rex was found inside a femur bone. So it wasn't even skin collagen. Okay, so how are they going to get collagen that is found in a leg bone and somehow manufacture that into skin? Not going to happen. Secondly, collagen contains no DNA. If you look at collagen structure under a microscope, basically all collagen looks the same from animal to animal. It doesn't look that much different. So if they were to take like a human being's collagen, look at under a microscope, yeah, the structure may be a little different, but not different enough to know what the skin is going to look like just looking at that collagen. What they can do is take that collagen, and replicate the structure of it and then make an assumption of what the skin would look like and then turn it into leather. I still don't know what science they are presuming to base this entire project on, but if they're basing it just on that sample of collagen that paleontologists found like decades ago, or at least a decade ago, that ain't happening. You cannot get collagen from a femur bone and somehow recreate skin out of that collagen. For one, leather and skin isn't collagen. Collagen gives it that elasticity and things like that underneath the skin, but it's not the skin. We don't even know what T-Rex skin looks like. So if they look at the structure of this collagen and they assume this is what its skin looks like, it's probably not what it looks like because we don't know what it looks like. They've got nothing to base it on. In fact, there are a lot of very reputed paleontologists that think T-Rex was covered with a very short, downy, feather-like covering. Not fully feathered like we see with our raptors, but there was definitely a feathering of some sort. From a distance, you may not have noticed that it was feathered in a way, but up close, it's very possible that it did have little bristles of feathering down it. Much like when you see an elephant from a distance, you wouldn't think it had hair, but up close, it's covered with hair. Very similar to that. So I have a feeling when they do this, these handbags are gonna look very similar to like the skin from the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. That's kind of what they're gonna look like because that is what humans are familiar with. They see it on TV and they just assume that's what T-Rex skin looks like in real life. But the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park weren't actual dinosaurs. They were genetically engineered to look scarier, to have that shrink wrap look, to where there's like if you look at the raptors or the T-Rex, it looks like the skin is like shrink wrapped to their skeleton and muscles. When in actual fact, dinosaurs like T-Rex had fat on them. They were chunky. They were fleshy. Sure, around the heads, it was probably shrink wrapped, much like our lizards are today. But its body was very heavily built. It wasn't shrink wrapped like that. And again, we can only assume what its skin looked like, what color it was. So this company has no idea. There is no chance it is replicating Tyrannosaurus Rex leather that would actually resemble real life T-Rex leather in any way, shape, or form. It's a cool concept. I really like it, but it's delusions of grandeur, I'm afraid. Unfortunately, I'd still want to buy one though, just because it's called T-Rex leather. Hell, it could be cow leather if it's labeled T-Rex leather. I'm buying it, man. And that puts us into our next topic. And this is a topic that, if you haven't seen it on the news, on social media, you're probably living in a cave. And I think you can probably guess where I'm going with this. The direwolves. Yes, the direwolves. They're back, baby. Direwolves are back after being extinct for over 10,000 years. And keeping with the same theme as our first story, this is a biotech company called Colossal. Now, I'll give you a little backstory on Colossal. Colossal popped up a few years ago. I remember seeing it sort of come into the public eye a few years ago and thinking, wow, that's really cool. This is like the real life Jurassic Park. And they've been talking about bringing back woolly mammoths, thylacines, the dodo perhaps, a whole range of animals. And now the first animals that they have, you know, air quotes there, brought back is the direwolf. Now the direwolf, if you've not seen Game of Thrones, that's probably how people know of direwolves. You know, those three kids were given direwolf pups. And, you know, a lot of people think direwolves are like these huge versions of wolves. But in actual fact, the direwolf only very slightly resembled our current modern wolves. It was on average not that much bigger than your average grey wolf. It had a slightly larger skull. I believe its legs were slightly shorter, and it was, I think, a little longer in the torso. But basically, all the dimensions of the direwolf still fits into the parameters of modern day wolves. So it would be, your average direwolf would be a roughly the same size as a large grey wolf. Not an exceptionally large grey wolf either, like your upper average grey wolf. So it wasn't huge. It wasn't like, you know, 6 foot at the shoulder or anything like that. Nothing like how big they were in Game of Thrones. So Colossal recently released videos, and they went public that they have 3 direwolf pups, and they're actually not pups anymore. They're quite like, they're almost, I think they're like a few months old now for sure. Like, they're not pups by any chance. They're big at the moment, like not stupidly big, but they're like to the point where, looking at them, I'd say they're about 7 or 8 months old. But they've only, I guess they wanted to wait a while to see how long they survive before they publicly let everyone know that they have direwolf pups. So basically what they did is, we have loads of direwolf bones and fossils. The La Brea tar pit in Los Angeles have unraveled hundreds of direwolf specimens. Hundreds. That's like one of the, if not the biggest deposit of direwolf remains in the world, is the La Brea tar pits, along with things like, you know, saber-toothed cats and other sort of Pleistocene megafauna, Ice Age megafauna. It's a gold mine there. Now, they've been doing work on direwolf remains for a long, long time, trying to extract DNA from teeth and other bones. But scientists have only really been able to extract and map out like 0.1% of the direwolf's genome and DNA. And that's been like that for a long time, for decades. I think since the 90s, maybe, that's when the scientists got that amount of information regarding its genome and DNA. But now, Colossal, with new technology like CRISPR, which is a sort of gene editing technology, they have gotten their scientists onto it with their groundbreaking technologies, so they claim, and taken another look at some of these direwolf fragments and remains, and managed to get a lot. This is in their words, mind you. They managed to get a lot more information and genetic coding out of those remains than the scientists did previously. So that leads us into how they created the direwolf from this extracted genetic information. Basically, they got 500 times more information from the remains than the scientists that were previously studying those remains, okay? So they were like, now we've got so much information, far more than what we previously had, we can recreate the direwolf. Well, if you look at it, previously they had 0.1%, and now Colossal has 500 times more information and more genetic coding and DNA than previously. That only means they've got 5% of the genome mapped out. Is that enough to recreate an entire animal? John Hammond in Jurassic Park did similar, but he actually used dinosaur DNA that was found in the mosquitoes that were then fossilized in amber. And then he filled in the genetic sequencing with frog DNA. And that's how, fictionally he was able to recreate the dinosaurs. There was obviously a lot of gene editing involved with that. Henry Wu, who was their lead geneticist, he filled in the code with other animals and basically engineered the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. But what Colossal has done is not even that far, because they don't have any direwolf DNA. They've got the mapping of it, but they don't actually have direwolf DNA. So what they did is they looked at grey wolves. Now, grey wolves split from the last common ancestor with direwolves about 4 or 5 million years ago. So direwolves aren't actually that closely related to wolves. They're in a completely different genus as well. They're not even in the genus Canis, which is what wolves are in. So what they did is they got grey wolves, they got the grey wolf genes and genome, and basically unsuppressed genes that they had identified in the direwolf that were switched off in our modern day grey wolves. And they basically reintroduced those genes into grey wolves. It's very similar to, for example, humans have genes in our body that have been muted to where we can grow tails, have our bodies covered in hair. Again, that gene must have been switched on in me. And they're like vestigial genes. And even nowadays, there are rare cases of humans born with tails, vestigial tails, which is that gene has sort of become active again, and they have the gene for tails. Very similar to what's going on with these wolves. Colossal were able to identify more genes using their new technology than in the past, and were able to basically build a wolf that has those direwolf genes switched on. So their gene, I think it was like 40 genes or something they were able to identify in direwolves that weren't in grey wolves, and they were able to cross them over into the grey wolf. And it was things like a larger skull, larger in body size, which again, as I said, isn't that much different to a grey wolf in general. So realistically, all they've done is they have selectively created a wolf with similar traits to a direwolf. They have not created a direwolf in any shape or form. Actually, maybe in shape or form, we're yet to see. Because when I'm looking at these direwolf pups, to be honest, if I saw one of them walking around the woodlands in North America or something like that, I wouldn't think they looked any different to a normal grey wolf. And another thing that Colossal did as well is they made them white. Now, the Game of Thrones direwolves were white, and they made these wolves white. We don't really know what colour direwolves were, but a lot of scientists agree that they probably weren't all pure white. They probably had very similar pelts to modern wolves, where the color varies so much. You can get jet black wolves, you can get white wolves, you can get wolves with brown pelts, grey pelts, things like that. They vary in color a lot. So most scientists agree that direwolves were pale in color, but not snow white all over. And they were probably had patches of different color on them as well. But it's very unlikely that they were pure white. Now, why did Colossal make them white? They claim that they found genes in the direwolf genome and DNA that suggested direwolves were white. But realistically, I think it was more of a publicity stunt to make them white, because people think from watching Game of Thrones that direwolves were white. They even got the pups posing on the Iron Throne, the throne made out of swords that was in Game of Thrones. Now, if that isn't a publicity stunt, I don't know what is, because yeah, I think it's a way to raise more money, and they're now valued at like $10.4 billion. So it's working. It's working. But they didn't create direwolves. As much as I would love them to have created and brought back direwolves, just out of a curiosity thing, they'll serve almost no function conservation wise, which is the whole ethos behind this company, Colossal, is to save animals from extinction by creating them in a lab and reintroducing them into the wild. Now, direwolves have not been on our planet for 10,000 years. We have wolves that fill the niche of direwolves, so why would we re-release direwolves? But I think they want to aim at more like, highly endangered animals that are nearing extinction and recreating them and releasing them. Why they're creating direwolves and woolly mammoths and things like that, I don't know. I just think they want to, because it's cool, and I agree it is cool. And the company's like so much like InGen, which is the company behind Jurassic Park, that I find it really cool. I find it really difficult to hate them, because they are the Pleistocene Ice Age version of Jurassic Park. So they're not bringing back dinosaurs or claiming they're bringing back dinosaurs, but they are claiming they're bringing back woolly mammoths. And I think they've even got a deal with a zoo in the United States, where they will give them direwolves to put on display in their exhibits. And there's even talk of opening up like a Pleistocene park or something like that, which is super cool. But don't get fooled, because these are not... they're not direwolves. They're not going to be woolly mammoths. They're not going to be thylacines. If you did a DNA test on these direwolves, they would come back 100% grey wolf, Canis lupus. 100%. So they're not direwolves at all. Basically, what they've done is they've almost done a version of selectively breeding these wolves to look similar to direwolves. Basically, selective breeding is, let's look at pigs. Pigs are born, some bigger, some smaller than others. You get runts of the litter, things like that. If you wanted to create a miniature pig, which they're still doing, naturally, you would get the smallest pigs in the litter and breed them and continue to breed them, take the smallest out of their litter and continue generation over generation. And basically, the genetics in those smaller pigs will be passed over to the new litter, and they'll just get smaller and smaller over time. You'll never end up with a pig the size of a hamster or anything like that, but you will get smaller breeds of pigs because you've selectively bred them to look that way. There's a type of bovid, type of bull called the Belgian blue bull, and it was selectively bred to have what's called myostatin. So, or lack of myostatin, mind you. So, myostatin is a thing in your body that stops your muscles from just continuing to grow. Now, these bulls have been selectively bred to not have myostatin, so they grow an outrageously higher amount of muscle mass than your average bull. Now, Google Belgian blue and you will see this thing. A lot of people are like, oh, it's on steroids, it's on hormones. No, they're not. They're completely hormone free. They've just been selectively bred to look like that. There's some dogs that are born with it too. I believe it's not common, but it happens in breeds like whippets with dogs where they're born with like almost double muscle. And there is a few cases of it in humans, and they've called it the Hercules gene. But they're not born with double muscle. They're just born with a far larger amount of muscle mass than the normal, what they normally would be born with. But it's pretty interesting. So basically, Colossal has fast-tracked that process and gone, well, instead of selectively breeding a wolf to have a bigger skull, to have, longer like vertebrae and torso, things like that, we're just going to turn on the genes that allows them to have that. So realistically, they could have done this without doing any work on a direwolf. They could have not even looked at a direwolf remain, and they could have selectively built a animal that looks similar to a direwolf. But I'm not sort of pissing on their parade. I know that they have good scientists working on this. The technology that they're using is pretty cool. It's pretty promising, and it's kind of just the start of something that could be very cool in the future. So they've got to start somewhere, I guess. But I just resent the fact that they are claiming they're direwolves when they're absolutely not direwolves. It's like Hitler. Okay, if you didn't know this, Hitler's kind of second in command was a guy called Heinrich Himmler, sorry. And Himmler was obsessed with things like the occult, the Spear of Destiny, which is the spear that killed Jesus, the Ark of the Covenant, things like that, and wanting to retrieve it. But also in Hitler and Himmler's to-do list, I guess, is bring back the Germanic country, and that means people that look like the pure Germanic people did. So, blonde hair, blue eyes, a real pure sort of country. And he wanted to rebuild Germany as what it used to be back in the day. And that also included the wildlife. Now, the forests of Germany used to be inhabited by an animal called an oryx. And it's basically the blueprint of today's cattle. So this was basically where our cows and bulls were bred from hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years ago, were oryx. They were big. Think of a bull that's big, it's jacked, it's got huge horns that sort of come outside of the head and then go upwards, so kind of squared horns. That's what an oryx looked like. Now, Hitler and Himmler wanted to repopulate German forests with these animals to make it more like what Germany once was. And he employed these two zoologists who basically were in charge of this World War II version of Jurassic Park. And what they did is they got uh, a type of bull and type of cattle that looked the closest to what the oryx looked like, and they selectively bred it. And they created animals that looked very similar to what the oryx looked like. Very, very similar. Had that sort of ancient look to it. And they released these so-called oryx into the forests of Germany. And because these oryx were bred to be more aggressive, so more like not domesticated at all, like today's cattle, they were big, they were aggressive, and they terrorized the countryside. They would attack farmers and things like that. So eventually they pulled the plug on it. And it wasn't that long ago, really, until like those Hitler's oryx was still roaming the woodlands of Germany, like terrorizing it. So it's pretty interesting. But that just goes to show how colossal. If they were going to do this using no DNA for the direwolves, then they, in a sense, could have done exactly what Himmler did with the oryx. Just selectively bred an animal, a wolf, to look like a direwolf. But that takes a long time because you got to do, generation, gestation periods, things like that. So they pretty much fast tracked it. But I'm interested to see what these animals are going to look like when they're adults. Because what I'm seeing now, I honestly don't really see any difference looking at them between a direwolf and a grey wolf. I'm not seeing any real standout features of these so-called direwolves. To me, they look just like grey wolves, white grey wolves. And when I say grey wolf, I'm not really referring to the colour. That's just a common name for some reason. And not all of them are grey. But these direwolves are white, and there are white grey wolves. But so far, sorry, I'm just not seeing direwolf in these animals. And again, I don't want to piss on their parade. I don't want to bring them down because they have people working on this that are a lot smarter than I am. But a lot of scientists that are smarter than they are coming out and saying, these aren't direwolves. This is very, very misleading. And it is a very obvious way for them to raise more funds and get more investors into their company so they can continue to do things like this. And I hope they do continue to do this kind of stuff. I'm very skeptical about how it's going to serve conservation because let's say they want to reintroduce more Amur leopards. An Amur leopard is a leopard that's found in like Russia, Siberia sort of area. And there's they're very low in numbers. At one point, I think there was only like 30 of them left. So let's say they were going to breed up in a lab more leopards. You would need a huge amount of genetic material from like different animals, like different Amur leopards. Otherwise, you're just going to reintroduce animals into the wild that have like a bottlenecked genetics. So inbreeding is just inevitable. And obviously a whole bunch of issues arise from inbreeding unless they can manipulate the genetics in the lab and make them significantly different to the other leopards' genetics. But I just don't see it. Like they wanted to reintroduce mammoths because they think that reintroducing woolly mammoths to snowy tundras will reduce global warming because the mammoths tread on the snow, which breaks the snow apart and cold air rises from the snow. But who knows? Like, I like this because it's cool and I want to see woolly mammoths. I want to see direwolves. I want to see saber-toothed cats. I want to see thylacines. But what I'm going to see is elephants that have been genetically modified to have woolly hair. I'm going to see a tiger or a lion that has been tampered with genetically to have far longer canine teeth, so it resembles a Smilodon, a saber-toothed tiger. That's what we're going to see, rather than actual genetically and DNA verified animals, unfortunately. Yeah, they will never find... I think they may have a lot of DNA from thylacines. I think. Which in that case they probably could, because they could use cloning techniques using that DNA. But without the DNA, complete DNA strands, you could have a significant amount of DNA and fill in the blanks, but you need a lot of it. With what they're getting out of these Pleistocene animals, like woolly mammoths and direwolves, isn't enough to rebuild that genetic code to the point where it's a direwolf. So, unfortunately, what you've seen on social media and the news and everything, they're not direwolves. They're not even close to a direwolf. They're closer to a direwolf than a wolf is in appearance, perhaps, but not a direwolf. And there's the bin man, about to make a shitload of noise. Of course. Of course. I'm glad it happened now when I was just finishing up this podcast and not right when I started, because what he'll do is he'll make a lot of noise coming past here, and then he'll turn around and come back, so it's double noised. It'll be double noised by the garbage man. And we've got the recycling bins out there as well, so that's potentially 4 drive-bys by the garbage man. But I don't know if you can hear it on this mic, but you probably will. But anyway, a lot of biotech companies coming out. I think it's great. I think it's awesome. I think there's exciting things in the future, and this is just the sort of just the seed of what these biotechnology companies and bioengineering companies are going to do and can do. So it's the start. It's the kindling. It's the tinder. And, you know, hopefully we have a repeat of Jurassic Park where there's dinosaurs running around terrorizing stuff. That'll be a laugh. But think about what they can do with genetics now and what they can do with things like illnesses. I think in probably less than 10 years' time, cancers will be eradicated. They're already working on cancer vaccines. Russia and the UK are trialing them already. You need to already have cancer for these things to work, but basically what it does is it uses your DNA and targets your specific type of cancer, and then switches on the genes that will kill those cancer cells, because cancer has the genes that basically kill themselves. They're switched off in the cancer cells, which is why cancer spreads so profusely through people's bodies. There is nothing in your body telling those cancer cells to die and switch off. So yeah, interesting things ahead. And yeah, that's all I have to say on the matter. And I hope to see... I always say I hope to see you on the next episode of Thorns Jungle, but I can't see you. But I can see your reviews. I can see how many people are listening, and I appreciate it. And if you appreciate Thorns Jungle as a podcast and you're learning and enjoy listening to it, then head over to my Patreon. The link will be in the description, and you will get an extra episode and a lot of other bonus stuff. And I will thank you immensely for supporting the podcast. I thank you anyway, even if you're not a Patreon supporter. Because you're giving me something to do. But if you don't want to be a Patreon supporter, leave a review. It helps a lot. And I'll see you on another episode of Thorns Jungle. They're not direwolves.